What's going on? Vincent Rapisardi, BigBlueUnbiased.com. Before I get this podcast started, I do want to say thank you to those who have watched my YouTube videos, who have subscribed to my YouTube channel, who have liked my videos, and who have commented on my videos. And even if you disagree, that's totally fine. I love good debates, respectful debates in the comment section. Also, thank you to those who have listened to my podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, Spotify, and all those other platforms. I really do appreciate it. So in this podcast, I want to talk about Eli Manning. So Eli Manning is now on Twitter. I didn't expect this. Maybe I did. I don't know. But he is now on Twitter. But aside from that, on Friday, I had started a discussion on Eli. And it started from a graph that I saw about quarterback efficiency. And this quarterback efficiency graph was among 20 eligible quarterbacks in this category. And it ranged from 2016 to 2019, which ironically is kind of the period of time in which Eli Manning fell off. Like his production just wasn't there anymore. So this graph features two very important statistics and big time football analytics statistics. Definitely not mainstream stats that most people are familiar with, and that's expected points added, also known as EPA, which is something I talk about a lot on my YouTube channel and in my podcasts. This graph also measures completion percentage over expectation. So completion percentage over expectation is exactly what it sounds like. Completing passes over what is expected. And your expected completion percentage is based on the difficulty of a throw. If you're completing over your expectation, obviously you are a talented quarterback or you are performing well. You are productive. You're able to make throws that other quarterbacks cannot make. If you are below that, then obviously you're making throws where you're struggling a little bit. You're not making the throws that you're expected to make. It's not the most important stat, but it's pretty valuable in terms of the overall skill level of that quarterback to complete passes, either passes that they're supposed to complete over the expectation of that or under the expectation of it. It says a lot. In terms of EPA, EPA is a stat that really adds a lot of context and value to each play. It takes into account down and distance and field position. So, like I said, it takes into account the value of a particular play. So, in terms of EPA per play, among these 20 quarterbacks, Eli Manning over this time period of 2016 to 2019 was dead last. Dead last among these 20 quarterbacks, and it really wasn't very close. And if you look at the 5 quarterbacks in front of him, Joe Flacco, Case Keenum, Marcus Mariota, Andy Dalton, and Cam Newton. Not one of those players is currently a starting quarterback in the NFL. And Cam Newton's not even on an NFL team at the moment. So let's take that into consideration here in terms of the overall validity of this statistic. And I know that like football is one of those sports where a lot of people don't want to embrace analytics. They don't want to embrace the mathematical side to the game because they love football for what it is in terms of heart and grit and teamwork. And that's fair. And I have nothing against that. And I understand. But at the same time, like, why wouldn't we use this? For some reason, like analytics is always viewed as, oh, it's just nerdy stuff. Well, every business uses analytics, right? They use data to form, their opinions of what they need to do moving forward, on their strategic opinions on what they should do moving forward based on data. Every company does that. Does that mean every company is nerdy? Why in sports specifically is it viewed as being nerdy? I don't really get it, right? If you do the math on certain things, that's kind of how you run a good business. Taking the emotion out of it and simply doing the math. I mean, if you build a house, you don't just show up with plywood and whatever else you need to build a house and just say, all right, we're building it. Usually you put together renderings, different measurements, get your big rulers out and all that stuff. And you want to make sure that everything matches up and you do the math. I don't understand why that's like so much different in football. Why can't you just do the same thing in football and do the math? Why is it looked at as like, oh, that wouldn't work. That'll never work in football. The analytics, I don't understand. Last baseball season, I got to work with the Detroit Tigers, so I really got to understand the analytics side to sports, and I saw the value. And I saw, all the devices that we used and the player tracking systems that we had and how it helped improve players, and not only on our team, but other teams and around the league, and really learning and studying up on the use of analytics in baseball and the value that it brought to so many teams. So I don't see why it can't add the same value in the NFL. I don't get it. What is so crazy about football that analytics doesn't add value? And I really like analytics because of the facts that can be used when creating an argument. That's my biggest thing about analytics that I really do appreciate and respect. So often in today's day, it's like everything needs to be hot take central. Everything needs to be narrative based. I had this interesting conversation. This is a perfect example of what I'm trying to talk about. I had this conversation on Twitter with somebody who was saying, who saw this graph that I just talked about, and Kirk Cousins has a higher EPA and a higher completion percentage over expectation than Aaron Rodgers. And someone said, so based on these numbers, you would actually take Kirk Cousins over Aaron Rodgers over this 4-year period, right? And I said, well, if the numbers are telling me he's a better quarterback, why wouldn't I listen to those numbers? So yeah, I would. Oh, you're crazy. That's why am I crazy? Because his name is Aaron Rodgers? Is that what you're relying on? Numbers tell me right here that Kirk Cousins is a more productive quarterback. So, what is so crazy for me to say, hey, I would pick the more productive quarterback over the quarterback that is not as productive? I don't get it. Because it's based on narrative. Oh, it's Aaron Rodgers. How could you pick Kirk Cousins over Aaron Rodgers? Because Kirk Cousins, this guy, he doesn't win meaningful games and he's Kirk Cousins and everyone makes fun of him. That's how you pick a quarterback, because everybody makes fun of him on Twitter, or they don't think that he's a franchise or elite quarterback just because they don't think that. That's why I think analytics brings a lot of value, because it crushes false narratives. And look, if you want to take Aaron Rodgers over Kirk Cousins, it's not this crazy idea either. But at the same time, it's like if you bring up the argument of Kirk Cousins potentially being a guy you would pick over Aaron Rodgers, it's like you're crazy and this is why analytics has no value. Well, it obviously has value, and there's a reason that I would pick him over Aaron Rodgers. If you wanted to pick Aaron Rodgers over Kirk Cousins, I wouldn't say you're crazy. I would say, okay, I get it. Aaron Rodgers has obviously had a very storied NFL career, and I get it. But I'm going to side with the numbers. And I'll be honest, I don't really care when it comes to backlash. Like, I'm always going to say what the facts are telling me. Like, that's the thing, right? Like, so during this whole discussion on Twitter, and you can go on Twitter and you can see for yourself if you'd like, and I'm actually going to post this graph on YouTube so you can see it. So this discussion is going on, and I'm saying, if you look at this graph, it basically justifies what I've been saying about Eli Manning for a while. And when I first started really doing YouTube, it was during the 2018 NFL season. And that was kind of like, that was Eli Manning's last full year as starter. And my content, a lot of it was about Eli Manning. And then people thought I was this big hater. And I'm like, I'm not a hater. I have nothing against Eli in any way. If he was productive, I would say it. But the Giants are losing a lot of games. They don't have a franchise quarterback just yet. I was in 2018. They had used the second pick on Saquon Barkley, not a quarterback, and Eli Manning wasn't productive. The numbers were telling me that. I was just going by what I was seeing and what the numbers were telling me. And obviously, I got a lot of backlash because people love Eli Manning, and it's a shame because there's a good group of people, there's a strong group of people who understand, and respect Eli Manning's career and understand, his accomplishments and respect it, but also understand and respect the idea that at the end of his career, he just wasn't a good quarterback anymore. He wasn't a productive quarterback anymore. But then there's this group of Eli Manning fans that they're vicious. I mean, it doesn't matter how many facts you bring up. It was never Eli's fault. He could have won 10 more Super Bowls if the Giants gave him the pieces that he needed. And it doesn't matter what you bring up. They don't care. It's just that's their guy. And if you say anything against him, you're wrong and you're just hating. I mean, I was legitimately bringing up stats and people were telling me that I'm a hater. I'm like, I've said good things about Eli based on stats. So how am I a hater? If I was a hater, I would just say he's not a good quarterback ever and he doesn't deserve to be in the Hall of Fame and he was irrelevant in Giants history. That would be a hater, right? That Eli Manning did nothing. But I don't say that. I've acknowledged his success. I've said that I think he's a Hall of Fame quarterback, and I think he's going to get into the Hall of Fame. I've specifically acknowledged the weight of his playoff performance. I've talked about that many times on Twitter. If you see the pinned tweet that I have that has over 7,000 likes, I think you could probably make a very quick assumption that I'm not a hater. If I was a hater, why would I tweet that out? You can go on Twitter and check that out if you'd like. But I like facts. I just like what the facts are telling me. And this isn't a full 4-year period for Eli and where we're judging his play, because obviously he wasn't the full-time starter in 2019. But this is a 52-game stretch, including their playoff game against the Green Bay Packers in the 2016 NFL season. But if you just look at, over the course of this 3+ period stretch, here are the rankings of cumulative football stats, right? That give you kind of a broad perspective of how he played. So passer rating, he ranked 22nd in the league in 2016, 25th in QBR. 2017, he was 26th in passer rating and QBR. In 2018, he was 26th in QBR and 21st in passer rating. And in 2019, he didn't technically qualify, but if he did, depending on the numbers that he had, he would have ranked 29th in passer rating and tied for last in QBR. And over this 3+ period stretch of football, games-wise, he only averaged 6.8 yards per attempt, which if we put it up to last year's, the 2019 quarterback statistics, he would rank 24th in the league. So my tweet was, you can make a legitimate case he was the worst quarterback during this era. If you take into account he was last in EPA per play, 18th among 20 quarterbacks in completion percentage over expectation. And then, like I said, just all of these other rankings and passer rating and QBR where he was never higher than 21st among quarterbacks over a 4-year stretch, averaging only 6.8 yards per attempt. As I talked about in a video about Daniel Jones, normally good quarterbacks are going to have a high yards per attempt. Good players are going to have a high yards per play. It's just common sense, right? And a lot of people are going to come back with the argument and say, well, it's because his offensive line wasn't good enough. He didn't get the help that he needed. And look, if the Giants were an 8-9 win team every single season and Eli Manning was middle of the pack in terms of QBR, pass rating, and EPA per play, and he just needed a little bit more help on the offensive line to make him a top 10 quarterback and to make the Giants a 10-win team and playoff contender, fair enough. But as I just mentioned, he was among the worst in the league in just about every important category that you would judge a quarterback. Cumulative perspective category, right? QBR, passer rating, EPA per play, completion percentage over expectation. Those really take into account kind of a broader perspective of someone's play. And he's among the worst in every single category. And that's what I had tweeted out, was that he was legitimately the worst quarterback in the NFL over his last 4 seasons. And that's when, obviously the Eli, or the E-Hive, as many people on Twitter like to call them, that's when the E-Hive came buzzing in and coming after me. I got a lot of nasty comments, a lot of nasty messages. And here's the thing, I honestly don't care. You can send nasty messages to me all the time and take jabs at me, and I really don't care in terms of it'll never stop me from putting out content. There's nothing you're going to say to me where I'm going to all of a sudden say, oh, that's it. I'm too scared to put out a tweet now or say anything, that might annoy them or bother them. I don't care. I literally lost 20 followers after I tweeted. And within that day, within the next couple hours, I had lost 20 followers just from that tweet because people love Eli Manning. But the problem I have here, it's not about me. Like I said, I don't care. You can say whatever comment you want to me. But it's other people, because I think that other people see the reaction that people have towards me when I say something that is based on facts. Look, if you don't agree with what I said, okay, but I'm not just making it up. Me saying that Eli Manning is legitimately the worst quarterback over this 4-year stretch, which legitimately in the argument of being the worst quarterback over that 4-year stretch, it's just based on what the facts are telling me. And like I said, EPA is a big time stat. Yards per attempt, completion percentage over expectation, QBR, passer rating, among the worst in the league over that time period. Like I said, if you're among the worst in almost every single important category, you can make an argument that's the worst quarterback in the NFL. I mean, it's not just 1 or 2 categories here. So, again, you can come at me all you want, but I worry about other people because I think other people see the reaction that I get, that other people see the kind of the hate that I get, the nasty comments, the messages that I get. I got a really nasty message yesterday Um, and I think that they're kind of like scared to actually say how they feel about things because they don't want to be called a clown or just get attacked by this group of people who are just entitled. I mean, look, if you don't agree with my opinion, that's fine. To curse me out because I said something about your favorite player that you don't agree with, like, who are you? So I worry about other people who want to voice their opinion, and it could be an opinion that's completely backed up by facts. But people don't like it because that's their favorite guy, and how dare you say something that's true, but not in favor of their favorite player. I've had this many times where people will reach out to me in messages and stuff, and they'll say, "Hey, I totally agree with you," and maybe they don't feel comfortable putting it out on Twitter because they don't want to be like made fun of or told that they're a clown or this and that. So they'll message me, they'll message me on Twitter or they'll text me or whatever if it's a friend or somebody that I know, someone in sports media or whatever it might be that I know. Um, and they'll message me privately because I do feel like they're kind of afraid of being attacked on Twitter by the Twitter mobs that are out there. So that's kind of what I worry about. It's like everyone should be allowed to have their own opinion, be able to back it up without being called clowns and this and that, and just have respectful debates. I don't get it at this point. I don't get it. Just have respectful debates. If you don't agree with me, okay. But everything that I talk about here is based on numbers and data. Okay. If you have an issue with the data and you just don't like it and you don't agree with it, fair enough. Okay, you don't. But I'm not making it up. Like, this is what the numbers are telling me. And it backs up, a lot of what I've said in the past. Like, going back to that 2018 season that I talk about, that I talked a lot about Eli Manning, and this kind of backs it up. At that moment, I said he was the most limited quarterback in the NFL. And I look at the numbers now, and I feel like I was right. I think that he was the most limited quarterback in the NFL. I mean, he had no mobility, didn't make throws downfield. His yards per attempt was low. His QBR was low. His passer rating was low. EPA per play was the worst among quarterbacks during that 4-year stretch. So the argument could be made that he was the worst quarterback during that stretch, and people don't want to hear that because Eli is their favorite player. People love Eli Manning, which I do get. I understand. But as I said, I will always acknowledge what the numbers tell me, what the facts tell me. And Eli Manning had a lot of success with the Giants, and he put together some really good years, and I will acknowledge that. And he was a big part in both championship runs, especially during the playoffs, specifically 2011. That 2011 season, he put the team on his back. The last ranked rushing attack, the 27th ranked defense. And EPA will tell you that. EPA per play, his total EPA that season. He was productive. He was a really good quarterback. I will acknowledge when a player does well, because I found it interesting so I had this whole Twitter conversation, and, then Eli joined Twitter, and there was a stat put up by ESPN that said, his QBR during the fourth quarter of both Super Bowls was 96 QBR. And I tweeted out, like, wow, this is incredibly impressive. He had a 96 QBR in the fourth quarter during both Super Bowls against the New England Patriots in the Super Bowl. Like, big stage, big opponent. Like, this is the dynasty of Brady and Belichick. And he performed almost perfect. 96 on the scale of 100. And I know I had someone comment and say, oh, but you were just trashing him. I don't trash players. That's not what I do. Okay, I don't trash players. I just speak facts. We have conversations and we have debates based on facts. Trashing a player is like, oh, I don't like him and I'm just going to say bad things. No, I have nothing against Eli Manning. I'm not pro or anti. I just like putting together a good argument. And if you want to have a respectful debate, I'm all for it. And in terms of maybe people, I think a lot of people were kind of like, oh, he's the worst. That's messed up. That's overboard. Well, that's a 4-year stretch of, again, being the worst quarterback in terms of expected points added per play. So, yeah, you could make an argument he was the worst. And when I say worst, we have to understand the context of what best and worst and greatest of all time, GOAT, is, right? When we judge best and worst, it's usually multiple seasons of putting things together. DeAndre Baker struggled as a rookie overall. He played better towards the end of the season, but he struggled. But a lot of people are going to say, all right, he's a young player. He struggled. Not many people are right now saying DeAndre Baker is the worst cornerback in the league and the Giants have to get rid of him because he's the worst cornerback in the league. Usually it takes 2 or 3 years for you to really develop a ranking for that player. I had the interesting debate about Nate Solder being the worst left tackle. And my thing with Nate Solder being the worst is, he was one of 9 left tackles in 2018 to have a pressure rate of less than 5%. So he was somewhat productive. Pro Football Focus thought he played well as well in terms of their player grading system, which, look, I'm not really a big fan of. But in terms of their, game tape, if you don't like my analytics, in terms of pressure rate and all that stuff, in terms of their ability to watch game tape, they graded him out fairly well in 2018. So an above average season, I would say, as a left tackle in his first year with the Giants. In 2019, all of a sudden, the amount of sacks and pressures went up. And so it was like, okay, well, why did the amount of pressures and sacks after having, a productive season in terms of not allowing too many pressures in 2018, why did it go up so much? I went back and I watched every sack and I found out the average time to throw on those sacks was 3.2 seconds, which is way above the NFL average of 2.5 seconds. Nate Solder also had a pass block win rate of 87%, which was average for his position, and the same as Tyron Smith and Jason Peters. Now, pass block win rate basically measures the rate in which an offensive lineman can hold the block for at least 2.5 seconds. So if you want to judge Nate Solder's 2019 season based on the amount of sacks or pressures he gave up, you could, but at the end of the day, if you do add context, you're going to look at, this huge spike in sacks and pressures from 2018 to 2019, and you're going to notice it had a lot to do with, a rookie quarterback in Daniel Jones who had pocket awareness issues, had 10 strip sack fumbles, and it's something that he needs to work on, which likely led to that high amount of sacks and pressures. If you want to chalk it up as a down year, you could. But at the end of the day, I don't think one down year all of a sudden makes someone the worst player at their position. Tom Brady statistically did not have a very good 2019 season. It was not Tom Brady-like in any way. That doesn't all of a sudden make him bad. He just had a down year. Maybe he was dealing with an injury. Maybe things just didn't work out. That could all of a sudden change in 2020. And if you want to flip the argument the other way, it took Tom Brady until his 4th or 5th Super Bowl win for people to start calling him the GOAT. People weren't calling him that after his 1st or 2nd Super Bowl win. It took time for him to earn that reputation. I need years of data to proclaim someone the best or the worst. And I know people don't like to hear that response because the Twitter culture likes responses right away and who's the best, who's the worst, who's the GOAT, who's this and that. But if you're going to make a legitimate argument, there needs to be some sort of patience. I'm not just going to tweet something out to get a reaction when I don't truly believe it. So I think it's important when ranking and saying the best and the worst, give it some time, let it develop, and then make an assumption. Give it a good amount of time where there's enough data to support exactly what you're saying. Because sometimes players have down years, and it just happens. And this past year, a lot of people were down on the 2018 draft class because they didn't feel like the Giants' 2018 draft class took the next step. But you can't truly judge a draft class until 3, 4, 5 years down the road. Because some players take longer to develop than others. And sometimes you're going to have a player who has a down year. I mean, up until the last 3 games, Saquon Barkley was having a down year, and that probably had something to do with the injury to his ankle. But at the same time, he wasn't performing. And his pass blocking was, people were being very critical of that too. A lot of people really were down on his ability to pass block. Will Hernandez, a lot of people weren't really impressed with in his 2nd season. So in general, a lot of people thought the 2018 draft class had a down year, and that happens. That doesn't all of a sudden mean they're the worst, right? They can have down years. It happens. It's football. It's sports. And that's just how it goes. You got to be patient. So with Eli, when I make the assessment that over his last 4 years, he was legitimately the worst quarterback, there's an argument to be made that he was the worst. I gave it a good amount of time. That's a 52-game stretch, including the playoffs. That's a good amount of time to judge a player. At the bottom of many important categories, perspective categories, as I like to call them. They give that broad perspective. QBR, passer rating, EPA per play, completion percentage over expectation, and specifically last in EPA per play. So that's where I make my argument. I gave it enough time to truly make that assessment. So that's all I got. Vincent Rapisardi, BigBlueUnbiased.com. You can find me on Twitter at Vince Rapisardi. You can find this podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, Spotify, and all those other platforms. If you like this kind of content, give it a thumbs up and make sure to subscribe. Thanks again, Vincent Rapisardi, BigBlueUnbiased.com.